Why is data protection so crucial in our globalized world, especially during international transfers? This question underpins our discussion today as we delve into the intricate world of international data transfers, a vital aspect of the General Data Protection Regulation. In this era of worldwide connectivity, data constantly flows across borders like water, making the world seem a little smaller every day. But as data travels, it carries with it a responsibility, a commitment to protect the personal information of individuals. This is where GDPR steps in, establishing a robust framework that governs how personal data can be transferred outside the European Union or the European Economic Area. GDPR's approach to international data transfers is grounded in the principle of ensuring adequate protection for personal data. This means that personal data can only be transferred to countries or organizations that provide a level of protection equivalent to that within the EU or EEA. But why is this so important? Well, think of it this way. Imagine you're sending a precious package overseas. You'd want to ensure that it's handled with care, right? The same principle applies to personal data. It's precious, and it deserves to be treated with the utmost respect and protection no matter where in the world it travels. And this doesn't just apply to individuals. It's crucial for businesses too. International data transfers are a significant part of global business operations, enabling companies to expand their reach, tap into new markets, and collaborate across borders. At the same time, these transfers also pose unique challenges, such as ensuring compliance with different data protection laws and managing the potential risks associated with data breaches. But fear not! GDPR is here to guide us through this complex landscape. By understanding GDPR's approach to international data transfers, businesses can navigate the globe with confidence, ensuring that personal data is protected every step of the way. So let's embark on this journey together, exploring the intricacies of international data transfers, from the legal framework and mechanisms for lawful transfers to the challenges and strategies for compliance. Understanding GDPR's approach to international transfers is the first step towards protecting personal data across borders. What does GDPR say about international data transfers? That's the question we're unraveling in this segment. The General Data Protection Regulation establishes a legal framework that governs the transfer of personal data outside the European Union. These provisions are designed to ensure that the level of protection of individuals is not undermined when their data crosses borders. At the heart of these provisions is the principle of adequacy. GDPR permits the transfer of personal data to countries outside the EU, referred to as third countries if these countries provide an adequate level of data protection. This adequacy is assessed by the European Commission, which considers factors such as the rule of law, respect for human rights, and the existence of effective data protection regulations and enforcement in the third country. However, not all international transfers are based on adequacy decisions. GDPR outlines two other categories of transfers. The first is transfers subject to appropriate safeguards. These safeguards may include legally binding and enforceable instruments between public authorities or bodies, binding corporate rules, standard data protection clauses adopted by the Commission, and approved codes of conduct or certification mechanisms. The second category covers specific derogations. These are special circumstances under which data may be transferred without an adequacy decision or appropriate safeguards. Examples include when the transfer is necessary for the performance of a contract, for important reasons of public interest, or for the establishment, exercise, or defense of legal claims. In essence, GDPR doesn't prohibit international data transfers, but it does impose conditions to ensure that these transfers don't erode the protections afforded to individuals by the regulation. It's all about striking a balance between facilitating global business operations and safeguarding personal data. GDPR provides a clear framework for how data can be transferred internationally. And as we delve deeper into this topic, we'll see how this framework is put into practice and the challenges and considerations that come along with it. How does the European Commission determine if a country provides adequate data protection? A question that brings us to the concept of adequacy decisions by the European Commission. Adequacy decisions are essentially a seal of approval from the European Commission that a non-EU country, territory, sector, or international organization ensures an adequate level of data protection. These decisions are based on a comprehensive assessment of the country's data protection laws and practices. The European Commission scrutinizes everything from the rule of law, respect for human rights, relevant legislation, data security and enforcement mechanisms, to access of public authorities to personal data. The beauty of these adequacy decisions is that they simplify data transfers to countries outside the EU. Once a country has been deemed to provide an adequate level of data protection, personal data can flow from the EU to that country without needing any further safeguarding measures. It's like having a green light for data transfers, making it a hassle-free process. As of now, the European Commission has recognized several countries as providing adequate protection. This list includes Andorra, Argentina, Canada, commercial organizations, Faroe Islands, Guernsey, Israel, Isle of Man, Japan, Jersey, New Zealand, Switzerland, and Uruguay. The United Kingdom has also been added to this list after its exit from the European Union. An adequacy decision doesn't just affect the country it pertains to, but also has a significant impact on data transfer mechanisms. It essentially eliminates the need for additional safeguards, like standard contractual clauses or binding corporate rules, when transferring data to these countries. This streamlines the process, saving time and resources for organizations involved in international data transfers. However, it's essential to remember that these decisions are not static. They are subject to periodic review to ensure the level of protection remains adequate. If the European Commission finds that a country no longer provides an adequate level of protection, the adequacy decision can be repealed, impacting data transfers to that country. Adequacy decisions play a pivotal role in facilitating lawful data transfers outside the EU. So next time you're dealing with international data transfers, check if the destination country has an adequacy decision. It could make your data transfer journey a lot smoother. What if a country isn't deemed adequate? Are there other ways to transfer data? Well, the answer is yes. When a country doesn't have an adequacy decision, data can still be transferred, but it must be done under what the General Data Protection Regulation refers to as appropriate safeguards. These safeguards come in several forms. First up, we have what's known as binding corporate rules, or BCRs. These are internal rules adopted by a multinational group of companies. They define the group's global policy with regard to the international transfer of personal data within the same corporate group to entities located in countries which do not provide an adequate level of protection. BCRs ensure that all transfers are compliant with GDPR and are legally binding. Next on our list are standard contractual clauses, or SCCs. These are pre-approved contractual terms and conditions that the sender and the receiver of the personal data both sign up to. They include obligations on the data exporter and the rights of the data subjects. The purpose here is to protect personal data leaving the European Economic Area through contractual obligations in line with GDPR's requirements. Now let's talk about codes of conduct and certification mechanisms. These are third-party certification mechanisms or codes of conduct approved by the relevant data protection authority. They provide appropriate safeguards for data transfers where the organization adheres to the codes of conduct or is certified under the certification mechanism. It's a way of demonstrating that your processing activities are GDPR compliant, and it can also help to enhance transparency and trust with data subjects. So, even when a country isn't deemed adequate for data protection, there are still routes to ensure that personal data is protected when it crosses borders. These mechanisms, when properly implemented, provide strong assurances and can help maintain the high level of data protection required by GDPR. Appropriate safeguards ensure the protection of personal data even when transferred to countries without an adequacy decision. Are there any exceptions to these rules? When can data be transferred without adequate protection? Well, as it turns out, there are indeed certain circumstances referred to as specific derogations where data can be transferred internationally without the usual safeguards in place. However, these are not loopholes to be exploited, but rather exceptions designed to accommodate certain essential or unavoidable situations. The first of these specific derogations applies when the transfer is necessary for the performance of a contract. For instance, an airline might need to share passenger information with a foreign hotel to arrange a booking. Another instance is when the transfer is required for important reasons of public interest. This could include situations where an international organization needs to share data to combat a global health crisis, like a pandemic. Legal claims also form a basis for specific derogations. If an individual is involved in a legal dispute in a foreign country, their personal data may need to be transferred to that jurisdiction to facilitate the legal process. Finally, the vital interests of the data subject can also justify a specific derogation. This might come into play in emergency situations, such as when a person's medical data needs to be shared with a hospital in another country to save their life. However, it's crucial to remember that these derogations are not a free pass for data transfers. They're exceptions meant to be used judiciously and sparingly. Moreover, each of these derogations comes with its own set of challenges and considerations. For instance, what counts as necessary for contract performance? How do we balance public interest and individual privacy rights? What qualifies as a vital interest? Such questions need careful deliberation. And of course, even when using these derogations, the principle of data minimization must still be respected. Only the minimum necessary data should be transferred, and the data subject's rights should remain protected. While exceptions exist, they should be used sparingly and responsibly, as they come with their own sets of challenges. What are some of the challenges in ensuring compliant data transfers? The world of data transfers is not without its hurdles. One significant challenge that has emerged in recent years is the effect of the Schrems II decision. This ruling by the European Court of Justice in July 2020 has had a substantial impact on data transfer mechanisms, particularly concerning the United States. The Schrems II decision invalidated the EU-US Privacy Shield, a framework that previously facilitated data transfers between the EU and the US. The court's decision was grounded in concerns about US surveillance laws and the perceived inability of EU citizens to seek legal redress in the US. This ruling has left many organizations scrambling to find alternative mechanisms for lawful data transfers. In light of Schrems II, it's become increasingly important to conduct transfer impact assessments, or TIAs, to ensure compliance with GDPR when transferring data outside the EU. These assessments are designed to evaluate the level of data protection in the recipient country, taking into account both its domestic laws and international commitments. They help organizations identify potential risks and implement appropriate safeguards to mitigate them. But the landscape of international data transfers is not static. Ongoing developments and negotiations are shaping new data transfer frameworks. For instance, discussions between the EU and the US are underway to establish a successor to the EU-US Privacy Shield. These negotiations aim to address the concerns raised in Schrems II, providing a more robust framework for transatlantic data transfers. Similarly, the European Commission is continuously reviewing and updating its list of countries deemed to provide an adequate level of data protection. These adequacy decisions can change over time, reflecting developments in the respective countries' data protection regimes. Navigating these challenges requires a thorough understanding of GDPR and a commitment to ongoing compliance. It's not a one-and-done deal. It's a continuous journey of adapting to evolving regulations and ensuring that personal data is always adequately protected no matter where it travels. How can organizations ensure they're compliant with GDPR's international transfer rules? The first step in ensuring compliance is to conduct a comprehensive assessment of your data transfer mechanisms. This involves scrutinizing the various routes your data takes as it crosses international borders and identifying any areas where the protection of personal data might be compromised. Once you've mapped out your data flows, you'll need to examine the legal mechanisms that underpin them. Are you relying on adequacy decisions, appropriate safeguards, or specific derogations to legitimize your data transfers? Each of these mechanisms has its own set of requirements, and it's essential that you fully understand and adhere to them. Now, we can't stress enough the importance of regular reviews and updates to your data transfer mechanisms. The world of data protection is ever evolving, with new legislation, court rulings, and guidance from data protection authorities emerging all the time. To stay compliant, you need to stay informed and be prepared to adjust your practices accordingly. Documentation is another crucial aspect of compliance. Every decision you make about data transfer should be recorded along with the reasoning behind it. This will not only help you keep track of your compliance efforts, but it will also be invaluable if you ever need to demonstrate your compliance to a data protection authority or in a court of law. Speaking of data protection authorities, businesses should not hesitate to engage with them if you're unsure about anything. They're there to provide guidance and support and can offer valuable insights into the interpretation and application of GDPR. Legal experts can also be a great resource, particularly when it comes to understanding the intricacies of international data transfer law. In conclusion, implementing compliance strategies for international data transfers is not a one-off task. It requires ongoing assessment, regular review, diligent documentation, and a willingness to seek help when needed. Compliance is a continuous journey requiring regular reviews and updates to data transfer mechanisms. So, what have we learned about international data transfers under GDPR? We've unpacked the importance of understanding the restrictions and requirements for these transfers in compliance with GDPR. It's not just about moving data from point A to point B. It's about ensuring that there are adequate safeguards and legal mechanisms in place to protect personal data during these cross-border transfers. We've delved into the intricacies of adequacy decisions, appropriate safeguards, specific derogations, and the legal frameworks that govern these procedures. We've explored how the principle of adequacy shapes the landscape of international data transfers and examined the categories of transfers based on these adequacy decisions, appropriate safeguards, and specific derogations. We've underlined the need for regular review and documentation of international transfer arrangements and the importance of engaging with data protection authorities and legal experts when necessary. Remember, the protection of personal data doesn't stop at the border. GDPR compliance is a global responsibility.